All right, let's talk about one of the most important and yet most ignored events in all of world history. We're talking about the Haitian Revolution. This is a story so intense, so world-changing, it literally redrew the map.
Years before anything kicked off, a French politician named Mirabeau said this. It's such a powerful image, right? The white colonists in the French colony of Saint-Domingue were basically living on a volcano, totally clueless about the pressure building right under their feet.
And let me tell you, when that volcano finally blew, it didn't just destroy a colony. Its shockwaves were felt all across the planet, shaking the very foundations of slavery, colonialism, and empire.
So here's the absolute key takeaway. What happened in Haiti had never happened before. And it's never happened since. It is the only time in all of human history that enslaved people managed to free themselves through a violent uprising and then go on to create their own independent country. It was, by any measure, an impossible victory.
So to really get why this explosion happened, we have to understand the powder keg it was sitting on. Let's take a look at what Saint-Domingue was actually like right before the revolution. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures this insane, terrifying contrast. For the people who were enslaved, it was a literal hell. But for France, it was the single most profitable colony in the entire world, a real cash cow. And where was all this money coming from? Well, mainly sugar. Saint-Domingue was producing a staggering 40% of all the sugar that France and Britain were importing. It was fueling Europe's obsession with sweets.
And it wasn't just sugar. The colony also pumped out 60% of the world's coffee. The economic output from this one tiny island was just immense. I mean, the jobs of millions of people back in France depended directly on the stuff produced here.
So, who was doing all this backbreaking work? Well, this is where the numbers get truly horrifying. Almost 500,000 enslaved Africans. The conditions they lived under were so brutal, the death rate so high, that the population couldn't even sustain itself. They had to constantly import more and more people from Africa just to replace those who died. And this table really lays out the social structure. At the very top, you had the whites, but even they were split. You had the super-rich plantation owners, the grands blancs, and then the poor or working-class whites, the petits blancs, who kind of resented everyone. Next, you had the free people of color, many of whom were educated, wealthy, and even owned slaves themselves, but were still denied full legal rights. And then, way down at the bottom, you have the enormous population of the enslaved, outnumbering everyone else combined almost 10 to 1. I mean, can you imagine the tension? The whole society was just simmering in fear and hatred.
Okay, so how did this whole powder keg finally go off? We're jumping to the year 1791. The ideas from the French Revolution, liberty, equality, all that, have made their way across the Atlantic. And suddenly, every single group on this island sees an opportunity to fight for more power.
But the real spark came from a place the French colonists totally feared because they didn't understand it. A secret voodoo ceremony. It was led by a priest named Duty Bookman. Now, this wasn't just a religious meeting, it was a war council. Voodoo was the cultural glue that united all these different African ethnic groups. It turned their plotting for a rebellion into a sacred spiritual pact. This was the signal.
And the eruption was immediate and brutal. Within just a few days, the entire northern plain, the richest part of the colony, was on fire. The rebels were getting payback for generations of torture, killing thousands of white colonists and destroying hundreds of plantations. The Vesuvius Mirabeau had warned about had finally blown its top.
The next 10 years were just total chaos. Alliances shifted constantly. At first, the rebels teamed up with Spain to fight France. Then, in a pretty radical move, revolutionary France actually abolished slavery to try and win them back. And it worked. The most brilliant of the rebel generals, a guy named Toussaint Louverture, switched sides and started fighting for the French. He drove out the Spanish and the British, who were getting absolutely decimated by yellow fever. By 1801, Louverture was the undisputed ruler of the whole island. But all this success got the attention of the new guy in charge back in France, Napoleon Bonaparte. He saw his richest colonies slipping away, and he decided he was going to take it back by force.
So in 1802, Napoleon sent the largest expeditionary force that France had ever sent overseas. We're talking tens of thousands of his best soldiers, led by his own brother-in-law, Charles Leclerc. Officially, their mission was to restore order, but their secret mission? Restore slavery.
Louverture knew exactly what was at stake. He ordered his generals to fight a scorched earth campaign.
For the Haitians, the choice was simple: liberty or death. They would rather burn the colony they'd built with their own sweat to the ground than ever see it become a slave society again.
And man, did they fight! At the Battle of Créapiero, Haitian forces held off the best of Napoleon's army for 3 weeks. They eventually retreated, but not before they inflicted devastating losses on the French. It completely astonished the French generals, who had written them off as an undisciplined mob. Even their enemies called it an incredible feat of arms.
But the Haitians' most powerful ally turned out to be disease. Yellow fever ripped through the European army, who had no immunity. It killed thousands upon thousands of soldiers. It was this terrifying, invisible enemy that even killed the French commander, Leclerc, himself. It completely crippled Napoleon's invasion.
By the end of 1803, the French army was broken. The former slaves had actually won their impossible victory. But freedom was about to come at a truly staggering price.
Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Louverture's ruthless lieutenant, made it official. He declared independence. And he threw out the French colonial name, Saint-Domingue, and brought back the original indigenous Taino name for the island, Haiti. The world's first black republic was born.
This quote from Dessalines' secretary, it just reveals the sheer rage and spirit of vengeance that followed independence. A brutal massacre of the remaining French colonists was carried out, a final bloody severing of all ties with their former masters.
The human cost was just astronomical. Hundreds of thousands dead on both sides. The economy was completely destroyed. And then, to add insult to injury, in 1825, France forced Haiti to pay an enormous sum of money to the former slaveholders in exchange for being recognized as a country. This independence debt basically crippled Haiti's economy for more than 100 years. It wasn't fully paid off until 1947.
But look at the global fallout. After being defeated in Haiti and desperate for cash for his wars in Europe, Napoleon just gave up on his whole American empire dream. In 1803, he sold the massive Louisiana territory to the United States. So yeah, the Haitian Revolution is directly responsible for doubling the size of America.
And all this brings us to one final big question. This revolution created a nation, it smashed Napoleon's army, and it redrew the map of North America. It challenged the racial hierarchy of the entire Atlantic world. So why is this world-changing event so often forgotten? Why, as one historian put it, has it been silenced by history? It's a question really worth thinking about.